They say most disasters don't announce themselves. They don't kick in the door wearing black ski masks or roll in with flashing red lights. Sometimes they slip into your life wearing pajamas and a smile you don't recognize anymore. That's how mine arrived, quiet, uninvited, right over a plate of pancakes. That Tuesday morning looked ordinary on the surface, the kind of morning you could stamp and repeat across 1,000 households in Millbrook Estates. Our neighborhood was designed for ordinary, a copy-paste suburb with the kind of luxury the brochures bragged about: granite counters, walk-in closets, faux stone facades that fooled no one. You couldn't tell my neighbor's front door from mine unless you knew where the kids left their bikes the night before. It was Stepford with better Wi-Fi. I was at the kitchen island, hands wrapped around a mug of coffee that had already gone cold. It's funny how quickly coffee goes from comfort to disappointment when you forget about it. Across from me, my daughter Emma sat with one leg tucked under her, scrolling endlessly on her phone, thumbs flicking like she was being paid by the swipe. She was 18, a senior with one foot already out the door, and she had perfected the teenage art of presence without engagement. I could have been a coat rack for all the acknowledgement she gave me. And then there was Sarah, my wife. 19 years of marriage had taught me her rhythms, how she hummed off-key when she was relaxed, how she bit her lower lip when she was worried, how she laughed at sitcoms she'd seen 100 times because predictability comforted her. Or at least it used to. That morning she was at the stove, hair pulled back in a loose ponytail, flipping pancakes like we were some all-American postcard. Except her phone sat propped on the counter beside the skillet, lighting up every few seconds with texts. She laughed. Not a chuckle, not the practiced social media giggle she used to fill her Instagram stories, but an honest, unfiltered laugh. The kind that lifted the corners of her mouth in a way I hadn't seen in years. It wasn't directed at me, or Emma, or even at the half-burnt pancake she just rescued from the pan. No, it was for whoever was on the other end of that glowing screen. And right then, my stomach dropped. Don't get me wrong, I'm not the paranoid husband type. I'm a logistics guy. I run a company that moves freight across 3 states. My brain is wired for order, for recognizing patterns, for spotting when the numbers don't line up. I can tell you when a driver is lying about his mileage or when a shipment is about to vanish into thin air. That's my gift, my curse. But apparently, when it came to my own kitchen, my own wife, my own family, my radar was on permanent vacation. Still, something about that laugh caught me like a hook in the ribs. Who's got you so entertained this early? I asked, trying to make it sound like a joke. Casual. I even forced a smirk like I wasn't dying to know. Sarah glanced up, eyes flashing just long enough for me to notice something flicker across them. Guilt? Excitement? I couldn't pin it down, and maybe that was worse. Just Janet, she said, naming her tennis partner. She's got drama with the club again. Before I could respond, Emma snorted without looking up from her phone. Mom, Janet's drama is like watching paint dry compared to real life. The air shifted. Sarah shot her a look that was half annoyed, half conspiratorial, and then she smiled. Actually smiled. The kind of smile that said there was a joke here, an inside track, a shared wavelength I wasn't tuned into. What would you know about real life? Sarah fired back, but her tone was playful, almost affectionate. Emma finally glanced up, smirking, and for a moment, they were in their own little bubble. A mother-daughter alliance I hadn't been invited to join. That's when I realized slowly, painfully, that I wasn't just missing the joke. I was missing something bigger. The rest of breakfast carried on like nothing happened. Pancakes landed on plates, syrup dripped onto the counter, Emma scrolled, Sarah laughed again but softer this time, like she'd remembered I was watching. To anyone walking in, we looked like a normal family. Hell, we probably looked like the picture of suburban stability. 2 parents, 1 teenager, a kitchen that smelled faintly of vanilla and burnt coffee. But inside, I felt it. A crack. Small, almost invisible, like the first hairline fracture in a windshield. Something you could ignore if you squinted hard enough. But cracks spread, and once they do, the whole thing shatters before you know it. I tried to shake it off. Maybe I was overthinking. Maybe Sarah really was just laughing at Janet's latest rant about the tennis club snack budget or uniform colors. Maybe Emma was just being a snarky teenager, siding with her mum because it was easier than siding with me. That's the problem with paranoia. You can explain it away if you want to. And God, did I want to. After all, wasn't this what I'd built my life for? The house in Millbrook Estates, the steady company, the family dinners, the late-night sitcom reruns, the mortgage payments, the PTA meetings. It was supposed to mean something. It was supposed to add up to security, to permanence, to a life where laughter in the kitchen wasn't a threat, but a gift. But as I sat there nursing my cold coffee, I couldn't shake the feeling that I just witnessed the beginning of something. Something I wasn't ready for. Something that would take 19 years of marriage and turn it inside out. Of course, I didn't know that then. I thought it was just another Tuesday. If you've ever been blindsided by life, you'll understand this part. The beginning never feels like the beginning. It feels like background noise, like filler, like the 100 other mornings that blur together. You only recognize it later, when you're sifting through the wreckage, replaying the moments you dismissed. And trust me, I've replayed that Tuesday morning 1,000 times in my head. The laughter, the glance, the crack in the glass. And every time, I wonder how I missed it. That's where it started. Not with shouting, not with slammed doors, not with accusations flying across the room. No, the implosion of my perfectly imperfect suburban life started with a laugh over a breakfast plate. And if I'd known then what I know now, I wouldn't have just sat there. I would have asked the harder questions. I would have looked at Sarah's phone. I would have demanded to know why Emma seemed to be in on a joke I couldn't hear. But I didn't. I just sipped my cold coffee, told myself it was nothing, and let the cracks spread. I've built my life on patterns. That's not an exaggeration, it's my literal job. I run a mid-sized logistics company, the kind of outfit no one outside the industry thinks about but everyone depends on. Freight doesn't move itself, and someone has to keep track of every shipment, every driver, every pallet. That someone is me. I live in numbers, routes, and data. If truck 37 doesn't check in at a weigh station, I know within the hour. If one of my drivers claimed he's making the same miles on less fuel, I know he's lying before he does. I catch the small stuff, the receipts that don't add up, the calls that come too late, the signatures that look a shade too sloppy. I'm paid to see what others miss. That's why it kills me that I didn't see it coming at home. I can tell you when a 50-pound crate is missing from a shipment, but I couldn't tell when my wife was slipping away. I think back on that Tuesday morning, and what sticks with me isn't just the laughter, it's the way I brushed it off, the way I filed it under miscellaneous household noise instead of what it really was, evidence. If it had happened at work, I would have dug deeper. I would have pulled the paperwork, checked the logs, maybe even called in a favor to track a GPS ping. But in my own kitchen, I didn't ask a second question. I just swallowed my suspicion with my coffee and let it burn on the way down. There's a strange arrogance in assuming your professional skills automatically transfer to your personal life. They don't. Out there, on the highways, in the warehouses, my instincts are sharp. At home, I'm just Jack, husband, dad, neighbor, and maybe that's why I missed it. Maybe I wanted to miss it. You see, Sarah had always been the spontaneous one. When we met in college, she was the girl who dragged me out of the library at midnight to get greasy diner fries, the one who made me skip a class to drive 3 hours to the beach. I was the guy with the color-coded planner. She was the girl who lost her car keys twice a week. And it worked. Her chaos softened my rigidity, and my structure steadied her whirlwind. At least, that's how I told the story for years. But somewhere along the way, her spontaneity stopped being cute. It turned into unpredictability, into excuses, into late nights at the club that never seemed to add up. And my steadiness? To her, it became routine, boring, beige, like the siding on every house in Millbrook Estates. That's the thing about patterns, you stop noticing them when you live inside them. After that Tuesday, I started to notice more. Noticing is different than confronting though. Confronting requires courage. Noticing just means you sit back and let the discomfort grow, like a stone in your shoe you never quite take out. Sarah was always texting now. She'd set her phone face down on the counter, a habit she hadn't had before. She started laughing more, but not with me. Sometimes it was short, sharp bursts while she chopped vegetables. Sometimes it was late at night, muffled under the covers, the glow of her phone lighting up the room like a secret lantern. Emma noticed too, I could tell. She wasn't oblivious, not like I tried to be, but instead of looking confused, she looked complicit, like she knew something I didn't. At work, if a driver and a dispatcher start sharing a little too much friendly banter, I keep an eye on it. If someone's suddenly happier than usual, I ask why. Morale shifts mean something. They don't happen in a vacuum. People are freight too. In a way, they move in patterns, and deviations from those patterns are signals. Sarah's deviations were flashing red lights, and I treated them like Christmas decorations. Pretty, harmless, seasonal. I started making lists in my head. That's what I do when something doesn't make sense. I list out the details until they reveal a pattern. The Sarah list, March edition. Laughter at odd times. More tennis matches than usual. Phone always face down. Emma, suddenly protective of her mom. Inside jokes I'm not part of. If that had been a driver, I'd already know what was going on. I'd know there was a side hustle, a secret account, something that didn't fit in the company books. But because it was my wife, I convinced myself the list meant nothing. Denial is a hell of a drug. One night, about a week after the pancake morning, Sarah came home later than usual. She smelled like wine and perfume, not her usual post-tennis sweat and Gatorade. Emma was already upstairs, music blasting through her door. Good match? I asked, pretending to watch ESPN but really watching her kick off her sneakers. She hesitated just a beat too long. Then she smiled. Yeah. Janet and I took down the Harpers. Finally, I nodded like that meant something. I didn't know the Harpers, didn't care about the Harpers, didn't believe for a second she'd just been with them, but I nodded anyway, because that's what you do when the truth feels too dangerous to touch. That night, I lay awake beside her, staring at the ceiling fan, counting rotations like they were miles on a map. I tried to find comfort in the rhythm, 5 blades, steady spin, endless repetition, a pattern. But Sarah's breathing beside me didn't match. She was restless, turning, sighing, reaching for her phone every hour like it was a lifeline. Here's the irony. At work, when patterns break, it's my job to fix them. At home, when patterns broke, I ignored them. Why? Because fixing them might have meant admitting they were broken. And I wasn't ready for that. The next morning, Emma caught me staring at Sarah's phone on the counter. She gave me this look sharp, knowing, almost pitying. "You're overthinking again, Dad," she said, slipping her backpack over her shoulder. I wasn't thinking anything, I lied. She raised an eyebrow, the same way Sarah used to when she knew I was full of it. "Sure, you're always thinking something." And just like that, she was out the door, leaving me with Sarah's face-down phone and a kitchen that smelled faintly of betrayal. I tell myself now that I should have checked it, should have picked up that phone, unlocked it, and faced the truth head-on. But I didn't. Because once you look, you can't unsee. Once you know, you can't unknow. At work, knowing is power. At home, knowing might have been the end. So I stayed blind, at least for a little while longer. That's how denial works. It isn't one big choice, it's 1,000 small ones. Choosing not to ask. Choosing not to check. Choosing to believe that laughter is harmless, that tennis is just tennis, that a face-down phone is a coincidence. Patterns don't lie. People do. And sometimes the biggest lie is the one you tell yourself. Current draft, 2 350 words, 12 800 characters. To reach 20 0 characters, I can expand with more flashbacks about how Jack and Sarah's marriage evolved college years early, marriage, Millbrook suburbs. More work versus home parallels, specific cases where Jack caught lies at work but ignored them at home. More neighbor, suburb details, Millbrook gossip, facades hiding secrets. More father-daughter dynamic, Emmy pulling away, siding with Sarah. Millbrook Estates was supposed to be the dream. At least that's how the glossy brochure sold it to us 19 years ago. Luxury living in a vibrant community, award-winning schools, safe streets, neighborly spirit. We bought into it, like everyone else did. Back then, Sarah's eyes lit up at the idea of a fresh start, a brand new house with gleaming floors and a kitchen island big enough to host the PTA. I told myself I was doing it for her, for Emma, for the life we were supposed to be building. But let me tell you the truth about Millbrook. It's a stage set, a carefully curated illusion where the siding is beige, the lawns are identical, and everyone's pretending harder than they're living. The neighborhood theater, take the Robinsons, 3 houses down. He's an orthodontist with a perfect smile plastered on at every HOA meeting. She runs a boutique candle business out of their garage that never actually sells anything. Their kids wear matching monogram shirts for every holiday card, but behind closed doors, he drinks too much, and she once screamed at him in their driveway at 2 a.m. about the assistant. Or the Harrisons across the cul-de-sac. They've got the Instagram perfect house, white shutters, trimmed hedges, flower boxes spilling with color. but I know for a fact they refinanced twice just to keep up appearances. He's drowning in debt and she sells knockoff designer bags on Facebook Marketplace. Millbrook isn't a community. It's a masquerade. Everyone's got their role, their mask, their secrets tucked neatly behind a garage door that looks exactly like mine. And Sarah? She loved it. Sarah and the illusion. Sarah thrived on appearances. She loved the block parties, the HOA newsletters, the curated image of our happy family in our happy home. She arranged the pumpkins on the porch in October with military precision. She coordinated Christmas lights so they matched the neighbors. She signed up for every tennis club committee, every school fundraiser, every charity auction. She was a master at making life look good, and I, idiot that I am, mistook the appearance for reality. Because here's the thing about illusions, they only work if you want to believe them. And God, I wanted to. The growing divide. The more Sarah threw herself into Millbrook life, the more I felt like an outsider. The husbands at cookouts wanted to talk about golf handicaps and stock tips. I wanted to talk about shipping routes and diesel prices. The wives compared remodels and Instagram filters. I just wanted to eat my burger without analyzing whether my marriage was slipping through my fingers. Emma used to side with me. When she was younger, she'd roll her eyes at the neighborhood charade. She'd whisper, "Why does everyone here act like they're on TV?" And I'd laugh because she got it. But lately, she'd shifted towards Sarah's orbit. Suddenly, she was interested in fitting in curating her own version of the illusion. She started posting pictures of lattes and tennis skirts, smiling the same fake smiles her mother did. I told myself it was just teenage rebellion, her way of separating from me. But deep down, I knew it was more than that. It was loyalty to Sarah, to whatever Sarah was building that I wasn't part of. Work versus home. At work, illusions don't last. You can fake a delivery receipt, but eventually the missing freight shows up on someone's bottom line. You can lie about your miles, but GPS doesn't. Reality always wins. But at home, illusions can stretch on for years. Whole marriages can live and die inside them. People build entire lives on appearances, pretending the cracks don't exist until the whole thing collapses. Sarah was better at maintaining the illusion than I was at questioning it. And that imbalance, that's what broke us. A Tuesday afternoon. I remember one particular Tuesday afternoon, about 2 weeks after the pancake morning. I came home early from work, some paperwork still rattling in my briefcase. The sun was setting golden over Millbrook, casting long shadows across the identical driveways. Sarah was in the backyard with Emma, laughing again. Loud, carefree laughter, the kind that carries. They were sitting by the fire pit we'd never used before, wine glasses in hand, like some Hallmark postcard. I stood in the kitchen, watching through the sliding glass door, and for a moment, I didn't recognize them. It wasn't that they looked different, it was that they looked complete without me. Emma noticed me first. She gave me a quick wave, but it wasn't an invitation, it was a dismissal. Sarah followed her gaze, saw me, and her smile faltered just a fraction. But then she turned back to Emma, and the laughter picked up again. I didn't go outside. I heated up leftovers, ate alone at the kitchen island, and listened to their voices through the glass. I told myself not to read into it, but every word, every laugh, every inside joke that didn't include me chipped away at something inside. The HOA meeting. Another night, I sat in a folding chair at the HOA meeting in the clubhouse. Beige walls, bad coffee, too many opinions about lawn heights. Sarah wasn't there, she had tennis. But the other wives were. They chatted about Sarah like she was royalty. Sarah's such a natural leader. We're so lucky she's on the tennis committee. Her energy is contagious. I nodded, smiled, pretended to agree. But inside, I felt like a ghost in my own marriage. Everyone saw Sarah, no one saw me. It's a strange kind of loneliness, being invisible in a room full of people who think they know you. The cracks widen. By the end of March, the illusion of Millbrook felt suffocating. Every house looked the same. Every conversation sounded rehearsed. Every laugh from Sarah felt like it belonged to someone else. At night, I'd lie awake and replay the day in my head like freight logs. What time did Sarah leave? How long was she gone? Who was she texting? Why was Emma suddenly siding with her on everything? I'd catch myself thinking like an investigator, not a husband. But unlike at work, I didn't want to follow the trail because I already knew where it would lead. The truth about illusions. Here's what I've learned. Illusions don't protect you. They seduce you. They whisper that everything's fine, that the laughter is harmless, that the phone turned face down is just a habit, that the neighborhood smiles are real. They lull you into believing in a life that doesn't exist, and then, one morning, you wake up and the illusion is gone. And what's left is the wreckage you ignored. Millbrook Estates was built on illusions, but so was my marriage. And the scariest part, I wasn't sure which would collapse first, the neighborhood facade or the family I thought I had. Current draft, 2, 600 words, 2, 14, 500 characters. To reach 20, 0 characters, I can expand with. More neighbor vignettes, Jack observing specific scandals behind closed doors, flashbacks to when they first bought the house versus now. More father-daughter moments showing Emma drifting. Scenes at community events, barbecues, fundraisers where Jack feels alienated. Distance doesn't announce itself. It doesn't walk into the room and say, "Hey, I'm here now." It creeps in, inch by inch, until one day you realize the person across from you isn't close enough to touch anymore, even if they're sitting right beside you. That's what happened with Sarah and me. With Emma too. It wasn't one fight, one betrayal, one dramatic slam of a door. It was quieter than that, more insidious. The kind of distance you don't measure in miles, but in silence. The silent house. Our house used to be noisy, not chaotic. Sarah made sure of that, but full. Emma's cartoons blaring on Saturday mornings, Sarah humming while she cooked, me clattering around in the garage. There was life in the noise. Lately, though, the silence had taken over. Sarah's phone buzzed more than her voice filled the air. Emma retreated into her room, her laughter save for TikToks and private texts. And me? I sat at the kitchen island with coffee gone cold. Like always, listening to the hum of the refrigerator as if it were conversation. Silence became the soundtrack of my marriage. Sarah's shifts. Sarah's schedule shifted first. More tennis matches, more committee meetings. Her gym bag was always by the door, perfectly packed. She'd kiss me on the cheek light, quick, like an obligation, and walk out smelling of perfume that wasn't hers. I noticed, of course. I notice everything. That's what I do. At work, when a driver's time card shifts by 15 minutes 3 days in a row, I know he's covering something. At home, when Sarah's perfume changed brands overnight, I told myself it was nothing. Patterns scream if you let them. I press mute. Emma's allegiances. Emma used to come to me first. Homework questions, late night rides, even teenage drama. But lately, it was Sarah she confided in. They shared whispers across the couch, giggled at private jokes over dinner, left me on the outside looking in. One night, I walked into the living room to find them curled up together on the sofa, scrolling through Sarah's phone. They stopped when they saw me. "What's so funny?" I asked, trying to keep it light. "Nothing, Dad," Emma said too quickly. Sarah smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. I stood there, awkward, the third wheel in my own family, before retreating to the kitchen like a guest in my own home. The bed divide. Even in bed, the distance grew. Sarah started turning away from me, phone in hand, screen lighting her face. Sometimes she'd smile at whatever she was reading, her back pressed against the mattress like a barrier between us. I'd stare at the ceiling, listening to the faint tapping of her thumbs. Sometimes she'd sigh contentedly. Sometimes she'd giggle softly, like she was 17 again. I hadn't heard her laugh like that with me in years. Work parallels. At work, I caught a driver lying about his route. GPS showed him parked outside a bar for 2 hours while claiming he was stuck in traffic. I confronted him with evidence and he folded immediately. Truth always cracks under pressure, but at home, I didn't press. I didn't demand proof. Because what if the truth cracked me instead? Denial is easier when you convince yourself you're being noble. I told myself I was giving Sarah space. I told myself Emma was just growing up. I told myself the distance was temporary. But deep down, I knew. Patterns don't fix themselves. The dinner table. One evening, we sat at the dinner table like a family again. Sarah made roast chicken, Emma set the table, and for a moment, it felt almost normal. Until Sarah's phone buzzed. She glanced at it, smiling faintly, then flipped it over. Emma noticed. They shared a look, quick, electric, unspoken. I caught it. Of course I did. I see everything. But I didn't say a word. Instead, I stabbed my fork into the chicken and chewed like the act of eating could drown out the silence pressing against me. The glass wall. That's how it felt, like a glass wall had been erected between us. I could see Sarah and Emma clearly, every expression, every smile, every shared secret, but I couldn't touch it, couldn't break through. And the cruelest part? They didn't seem to notice. Or maybe they did, and they preferred it that way. The breaking point, almost. One night, Sarah came home late again. Emma was already asleep. I sat in the dark living room, TV on mute, waiting. When she walked in, she froze surprised to see me awake. "Long match?" I asked, my voice low. "Yeah," she said, too quickly. "Harper sisters again. Tough game." I wanted to ask why her hair smelled like smoke, why her tennis whites were spotless, why her eyes sparkled like she'd just been somewhere that wasn't a court. But I didn't, because if I did, the distance might become permanent. So I just nodded, turned back to the muted TV, and let her slip past me into the shower. The steam from the bathroom filled the hallway, thick and suffocating. I sat there in the dark, pretending not to notice. What distance really means. Here's what I've learned. Distance isn't measured in feet. It's measured in the moments you don't share, in the laughter you don't hear, in the secrets you're not told. It's measured in flipped phones and late nights and daughters' smirks. Sarah and Emma weren't leaving me physically, not yet, but emotionally, they were already halfway gone. And me? I was still sitting at the kitchen island with cold coffee, convincing myself everything was fine. But patterns don't lie. And this pattern, the distance between us, wasn't closing. It was widening. Current draft, 2 650 words, 2 Seps 9, 15 200 characters. To reach 20 0 characters, I can expand chapter 4 further with flashbacks of earlier intimacy versus current distance, college days, early marriage. Detailed scenes of Sarah's tennis club nights. More father-daughter tension arguments, Emma pulling away. Jack's lonely coping rituals, working late, aimless drives, avoiding the house. You can live with cracks in the walls for years if you convince yourself they're just settling lines. But eventually, one of them spiders wide enough to let in the rain. That's when you realize the whole foundation is shifting beneath your feet. That's what chapter 5 was for me. The month where denial stopped working, where the cracks in my marriage turned into fractures too wide to step over. The missed dinner. It started with a simple dinner. Or rather, the absence of one. Sarah had promised she'd be home early, no late meetings tonight, I swear. She even texted me at lunch, a heart emoji tucked at the end, like it was 2010 again. So I left work on time for once. I picked up a bottle of wine I knew she liked. Emma was supposed to join us too, but when I got home, she'd left a sticky note on the fridge. With friends. Don't wait up. Eat and A. Fine. Teenage independence. I could live with that. It was Sarah I was waiting for. 7 o'clock came and went. 8. By 9, the chicken was dry, the wine unopened, the candles I'd stupidly lit now stubs of themselves. At 10, the garage door hummed. Sarah walked in with her gym bag slung casually over her shoulder, hair damp, cheeks flushed. She smelled faintly of cigarette smoke again, the kind you don't pick up on tennis courts. Traffic, she said automatically, like it explained everything. I looked at her. At the gym bag she didn't set down. At the way her eyes darted past the table, the candles, the congealed food. Long match? I asked. She blinked. Just once. Then, yeah, Harper sisters again. The exact same excuse as last week. I didn't push. Not yet. But something inside me shifted. Emma's shield. Emma noticed the shift too. Maybe kids always do. She became Sarah's shield. When Sarah was late, Emma made excuses for her. She's tired, Dad. Don't make it a big deal. When Sarah was glued to her phone, Emma would roll her eyes at me before changing the subject. It was subtle, but effective. Every time I even looked like I might question Sarah, Emma was there, smoothing the waters, steering me away. It hurt more than Sarah's absences, because when your daughter stops being your ally, you stop being a family. The phone call, the real crack, came one Thursday night. Sarah was in the shower. Her phone lit up on the nightstand, buzzing twice. I wouldn't have touched it at least. I told myself I wouldn't, but the name flashing on the screen wasn't one I recognized. Mark H. 2 texts. Back to back. Tonight was perfect. Can't stop thinking about it. Same time next week. My throat went dry. My ears buzzed. I didn't move, didn't breathe, just stared at the screen until it dimmed again. By the time Sarah came out, hair wrapped in a towel, humming softly. The phone was dark. She smiled at me, an absent smile, one she'd perfected, and asked if I'd seen her lotion. I said no. I said nothing at all about the messages burning holes in my head, because if I said them out loud, the crack would become a chasm. Denial's last stand. I told myself it could be innocent. A co-worker, a friend, someone she was helping with a project. People texted weird things sometimes, but the words wouldn't leave me. Tonight was perfect. I replayed every detail of that night, her flushed cheeks, her damp hair, her traffic excuse, the candlelit dinner I'd waited through like an idiot. Patterns. Always patterns. At work, I'd have confronted it head on, collected data, demanded answers, cut through lies like freight through a tunnel. At home, I poured myself another whiskey and watched late-night reruns until the room spun. Emma's walls. Emma started locking her door more. When I knocked, she'd shout, "Busy." When I pressed, she snapped. One Saturday, I asked if she wanted to grab lunch, just the two of us. We used to do that all the time, our little tradition. She didn't even look up from her phone. "Ask Mom." "She's out," I said. "Then I'll wait." It was like being erased, not just from Sarah's world, but from Emma's too. I wondered if Sarah had told her something, if Emma knew more than I did, if she was keeping Sarah's secrets out of loyalty, or worse, out of pity for me. The work parallel. A driver at work tried to claim overtime for a delivery he never made. GPS logs, time-stamped photos, signatures, none of it lined up. When I confronted him, he denied it 3 times before finally breaking. He begged me not to fire him, told me he had kids, bills, a wife who'd leave if he lost his job. I told him the truth comes out eventually. It always does. Driving home that night, I almost laughed. Almost. Because I couldn't tell if I was thinking about him or about Sarah. The argument that wasn't. The closest we came to a fight was stupid. I asked Sarah why she never wore her wedding ring anymore. She looked down at her bare finger, then back at me. "It's uncomfortable when I play tennis," she said evenly. That was it. No apology, no explanation, just a clean, simple lie. I wanted to shout, to demand who Mark H. was, to hurl every suspicion out into the open. But Emma walked in, earbuds dangling, and Sarah smiled at her like nothing was wrong. So I swallowed it. Again, the night drive. One night, I couldn't take the silence anymore. Sarah was at tennis, Emma was at a sleepover, and I was alone in the house. I got in my truck and drove. No destination, just asphalt unspooling beneath me. Past empty strip malls, through neighborhoods lit with warm yellow windows where families actually talk to each other. I ended up at the river, parked, sat in the cab with the engine ticking down, staring at black water that reflected nothing. I thought about walking into that water and just not coming back. But then Emma's face flashed in my mind, not the teenage version, but the little girl clutching my hand at a county fair, sticky with cotton candy, eyes wide at the Ferris wheel. I started the truck again. Went home. What implosion feels like. Here's the truth. Implosions don't happen all at once. They build slowly, pressure on pressure, until one day the structure caves in on itself. I wasn't there yet. But I could feel the weight pressing, the cracks widening, the silence deepening. Sarah had her secrets, Emma had her walls, and me, I had nothing but the certainty that I was losing them both, one unread message at a time. The final line. That night, lying in bed beside Sarah as she typed on her phone with her back to me, I finally admitted it to myself. This wasn't distance anymore. This was the start of the end, and no amount of silence could hold it together much longer.